From 1909 to 1910, French journalist and author Gaston Leroux published his serialized novel, The Phantom of the Opera, in Le Gaulois, a French newspaper. Gaston Leroux then gave that novel to Hollywood filmmaker Carl Laemmle. Yes, I was wrong in how I was pronouncing that, who went on to cast Lon Chaney, the Man of a Thousand Faces, as the Phantom in one of silent cinema's most iconic and enduring horror classics, 1925's The Phantom of the Opera. There is a piece of hair on my lip. I can feel it. I can feel it on my lip. I can feel it. Since then, there has been a Phantom of the Opera adaptation nearly once every decade, if not more, and November 15th, 2025 will mark the 100th anniversary of the first surviving film adaptation of Phantom of the Opera. Hello, my beautiful angels of music, and welcome back to 100 Years of Phantom. Today, we'll be talking about the 1943 Phantom of the Opera starring Claude Rains as the Phantom and Susanna Foster as Christine. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, we'll be working through the adaptations in chronological order by release date. However, there is one small caveat. It's chronological order by release date for English language theatrical releases or TV series / TV movies. I'm sort of dedicating 2025 to Phantom of the Opera, but once 2026 hits, I'll start to spread these videos out a bit more. So the series isn't ending by 2025, and I'm not trying to do all of the movies in 2025. I'm just trying to get to the most recent big adaptation of Phantom of the Opera, the 2004 movie musical, by December. And then I'll start circling back to some of the more fringe adaptations, let's say, like Song at Midnight, the 1930s Chinese adaptation of Phantom of the Opera, or A Monster in Paris, the animated French film where a flea with the voice of an angel takes the Paris stages by storm. Now, if you have not listened to the soundtrack for A Monster in Paris, you're missing out. That soundtrack is exquisite. Je ne sais pas pourquoi le sang comme ça, la scène et moi. So good. I love A Monster in Paris. So please know, I will be circling back. I do have a semi-comprehensive list started, but feel free to comment any Phantom of the Opera adaptations you know about so I can make sure I don't miss them. All right, wrapping up, we're almost ready to dive into the 1943 Phantom of the Opera. Just a quick reminder on the format of the series, I'm going to be going over the synopsis of the film with some trivia sprinkled throughout or just clumped at the end if I can't work it into the synopsis. Then I will be ranking the adaptation on both book accuracy and my personal opinion on the film itself. With all that taken care of, and of course with the obligatory reminder to like and subscribe, let's get into it. Hear those bells ringing soft. The 1943 Phantom of the Opera has beautiful costumes, gorgeous sets, a haunting lullaby / leitmotif, if I'm using that term correctly. I think I am, but just a disclaim. And the movie is incredibly charming and funny. Yes, you heard that right. This adaptation of a gothic horror story about a sad, sad man with a weird-looking face is both charming and funny. Because here's the deal. In my review of the 1925 silent film, it's called Lon Chaney, the Phantom of a Silent Opera. In that video about the 1925 silent film, I mentioned toward the end that when it comes to the final layer, the finale, the studio cycled through several possible endings. One that was book accurate, a few that were close to book accurate but still were different, one that they ended up choosing where they keep him a devil till the end, which I will never let go of. And at one point, they even tried hiring a new director, reshooting almost the entire movie so that it was more of a romantic comedy, where Christine had two romantic leads and also somehow the plot of Phantom of the Opera was happening. But because this version, this romantic comedy version of Phantom, was booed out of theaters during a test screening, they opted to go back and re-edit the original footage back in to make it closer to Gaston Leroux's Phantom of the Opera. The phrase reduce, reuse, and recycle may not have been coined until sometime in the 70s, but the powers that be at Universal Studios in 1943 really embodied that ideal by resurrecting that scrapped story idea and presenting the world with a shiny, new, romantic comedy version of Phantom of the Opera that bears almost no resemblance to Gaston Leroux's work outside of, the broad strokes concept of like a phantom in an opera. But this movie is just so delightful and charming that I can't even be mad at it. Like, have your fun if you're gonna do this good. You crazy kids, just make a movie if you want to. I'm just having a nice time. Now, I was looking into some of the trivia about the movie because That's what I'm doing here. But there were actually 4 attempts to remake the 1925 silent film in or around the 40s that were scrapped before this version actually made it to screen. And some of these ideas that were scrapped, that didn't make it to film, were a version of Phantom of the Opera where the Phantom was a shell-shocked World War I veteran whose disfigurement was more an illusion in his own mind. Oh, I would watch the heck out of that. If anybody wants to hop on that, since we are 20 years behind, we should have had an adaptation in 2014. If we were on schedule, we would have had a 2014 Phantom, but somebody said, oh, Andrew Lloyd Webber, what we made there was good enough. Let's just break tradition. Even though we've been making at least one Phantom movie every decade, we're just going to let this decade pass us by. 20 years of our lives are going just rolling, time, passing every day, every moment, every second, a glimmer of light on the wing of a butterfly, never to return, we'll never get it back, and in all this time, we're not going to get another Phantom of the Opera adaptation. We're just going to tease you with the dark universe and then break your heart after you see The Mummy in theaters twice. The Tom Cruise Mummy. If this video has any moment where it's appropriate for me to interrupt, hi, editing Summer here, and once again suggest my recommendation for the next Phantom adaptation, which is for Guillermo del Toro to direct a book-accurate movie, or more preferably like an 8-episode miniseries of Phantom of the Opera, starring Jamie Campbell Bower as the Phantom, because if you'll recall, Jamie Campbell Bower was Vecna in Stranger Things. What does Vecna lack that the Phantom of the Opera in the book also lacks? That's right, a nose. So he's familiar with the makeup. He's familiar with what would need to be done for that. Guillermo del Toro, we know him. We've seen Crimson Peak. That's all. Thank you. I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to keep saying it till it happens. Because it's the good idea. It's a good idea. Thank you. If anybody knows Guillermo del Toro, just give him a call for me. Say, hey, heard an idea. Anyway, they also briefly considered making it an Abbott and Costello movie. They thought about making a version with the Three Stooges. Lon Chaney Jr. was suggested as an option to take over the role his father had made iconic, and apparently, according to the trivia page on IMDb, that was never actually seriously considered, which was deeply insulting to Lon Chaney Jr. because, like I said, it was his father's role. So there's some frigid goss for you. That tea was poured during the late stages of World War II, and it's just been sitting in the cup, evaporating. I don't even know how there's liquid in there anymore. Maybe it's just a rim of dust of the tea that once was. But Lon Chaney Jr., not a huge fan of the fact that they didn't seriously consider casting him as the Phantom in the remake. And I agree with him. I think that would have been neat. A legacy. But they didn't have the vision. They didn't have the range.
She doesn't have the range.
I am going wildly off script. I spent 3 hours writing this script, and it's the microphone. It makes me feel like I'm a stand-up comedian and I have a prop. Oh, good heavens. Okay. In one of the versions, they were in talks to cast Cesar Romero, the Joker, as Phantom of the Opera. And I mentioned the Joker later in this video, but when I wrote that bit in, I didn't even realize. I didn't even know. No one had told me. I hadn't read the trivia page on IMDb yet. But yeah, I thought that was neat. So at one point, we could have lived in a world where the Joker was Raoul de Chagny. The movie opens with a beautiful establishing shot of the Paris Opera stage. And this is Soundstage 28, the set that was built for and used in the 1925 silent film. And I have a little bit more trivia about this stage. Apparently, it was all built on like a giant turntable so that they could use it, like if they needed to see a different part of the stage, they could turn it, which I just think is really neat. And I found in the trivia from IMDb of the 1943 film a more comprehensive list of some show. It's not all the shows that this stage was used for, but some of them. It says that it was used in Phantom of the Opera 1925, Phantom of the Opera 1943. It was used in the 1966 Alfred Hitchcock feature Torn Curtain. It was used in Thoroughly Modern Millie, and it was used in Murder, She Wrote. And one thing I appreciate is a good establishing shot, and we get a really nice one of the chandelier. The camera pulls back from the stage, we get a really good look at the chandelier, and a full chorus is performing the closing number of an opera to a rapt audience. This movie really leans into the opera of it all. It has the tone and feel of a musical made during the golden age of Hollywood. Think Singing in the Rain, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, like big musical numbers. But because Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber hadn't gotten around to writing Phantom of the Opera in, 1941, 1942, when this movie was being produced, actually, if we're being fair, he hadn't gotten around to being born yet during that time. They just had to make do with some full-length operatic numbers performed on stage to a theater audience, just sprinkled healthily throughout the runtime of the film. When it comes to the music and when it comes to the set, one thing to keep in mind is that they were on a little bit of a budget for this movie, a wartime budget, because when this movie was being made, 1941, 1942, released in 1943, there was a war on in Germany. I don't know, a little number called World War II. And so the studio had to save money by reusing sets. Very fortunate that they had a giant set of the Paris Opera House to reuse, but apparently for some of the other scenes, like the manager's office, they were reusing pieces from other movies. And when it comes to the music specifically, they opted to save money by not using any copyrighted music. They only used music that was already in the public domain. So this opening number is from an opera called Marta, and that is actually the only full operatic number that is used in this movie, like from an actual opera, because that was the only opera in the public domain. The rest of the musical scenes that you see on screen, and there are plenty of them, they were actually created for the film using a public domain score, so some piece of classical music that had made it into the public domain, and then just adding operatic lyrics to it. And I just think that's super neat. And while this opening number is being performed, we're introduced to our main characters: Erique Claudin, Christine Dubois, Inspector Raoul Daubert, Anatole Garron, and Madame Biancaroli. I think we can all agree that there have been some significant changes right out of the gate. Biancaroli is our La Carlotta. Her name may be different, but her role as the more experienced prima donna and Christine's professional rival remains unchanged, with the added bonus of being romantic rivals with Christine for the affections of Anatole Garron, a baritone with a beautiful voice who does not exist in any form at all in the book. He is not from Gaston Leroux's The Phantom of the Opera. And one thing that Biancaroli just needs to figure out is that it's never gonna happen. The good ship that is Anatole's heart has already set sail, and it has renamed itself to the SS Christine. So move on, Biancaroli. Move on. So Anatole is handsome, charming, has a glorious singing and speaking voice, but all is not easy on the seas of love, because Anatole Garron has a romantic rival for Christine's affections in Inspector Raoul Daubert. Yes, Raoul, a character we recognize. This retelling gives us a Raoul that has no brother, has never been to sea, and is not the Vicomte Raoul de Chagny. He is, in fact, an inspector in the Sûreté. This man is nothing like his book counterpart, and also has very little in common with Christine, though at the beginning they do seem to be in an established relationship.
I hurried over to tell you something.
What?
that I love you.
Again.
Still.
Or at least it's an established enough relationship that she lets her conversation with him backstage distract her from going out and taking her final bows with the rest of the chorus, which is something everybody feels the need to comment on.
Christine, why weren't you on the stage for the end of the act?
Why weren't you on the stage for the curtain calls, mademoiselle? I'd like a few words with Mademoiselle Dubois in my office at the performance.
I promise you I'll never miss a curtain call again.
Promise.
Christine herself is also significantly changed from the source material. And a reminder, if you need a refresher on the source material, you can watch the very first video of this series, a 4-hour-long epic called An Outrageously Thorough Synopsis of Gaston Leroux's Phantom of the Opera, made by yours truly. Susanna Foster makes a beautiful Christine. She's just lovely. Her singing voice is fantastic. Her costumes are gorgeous. I really do enjoy her as Christine, even if she is nothing like the Christine Dubois of the books. Description-wise, like how Christine is described in the books, perfect casting. In character, in backstory, in action, no. So one thing they did to change her is they made her fully French. Her name in this version is not Christine Dubois, it is Christine Dubois. They dropped the Dubois, they dropped her Swedish backstory, they dropped the tragedy of her father's passing, they dropped her childhood connection to Raoul. All we know about this version of Christine is that she's very pretty, she sings very well, and she is a successful member of the chorus with promise, and that's why she's brought into the director's office for a little light scolding after she misses that curtain call. Now, in the book, it was made clear that a major impediment between Raoul and Christine's love was class and profession. Christine was a working class singer, Raoul was titled gentry, and as it's stated in the book, the Vicomte Raoul de Cheny could not marry a singer. Which meant if Raoul and Christine were to marry, Christine would need to abandon her career and in some ways abandon music, and that would be a very difficult decision for a woman like Christine to whom music is an intrinsic part of her nature. You would think by making Raoul a working class inspector that this impediment would be removed, but no, not so. This movie is still asking the same question, but in a much more direct manner.
But you must choose between an operatic career and what is usually called a normal life.
Even going so far as to say,
The artist has a special temperament, and he must live his life
exclusively with those who understand. The eternal rom-com question, should a woman pursue love or her career? And this is going to be the major question of Christine's character journey. Now, in the book, she was on a journey through grief, and the love or career of it all was sort of a bonus little thread woven throughout that enriched the tapestry that was Christine Dubois. They brought that to the forefront. They waved the grief away entirely. And this decision she has to make between her art and a normal life is highlighted perfectly in her two romantic leads. Raoul d'Aubert, as an inspector, is intelligent and clever, and he and Christine clearly get along very well. But he is not artistic in nature.
You have missed half of the opera. As usual, I didn't come to see the opera. As usual. But as you know, I'm no connoisseur of the opera.
And actually says,
I've had your thing at this for 2 years.
But I don't want to give up the opera.
Meanwhile, Anatole is a singer like Christine. La 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 la. He thinks that Christine has promise and he wants to work with her to help hone her skills and talents and further along her career. He understands that artistic side of her because he shares that passion for music. Now, I hear you asking, Summer, where does the Phantom of the Opera fit into this all? Isn't this movie called The Phantom of the Opera? One thing I forgot to mention is that in the opening credits, put a clip here, editing Summer. Hold on. I'm in the middle of laundry. Excuse me. They say based on the composition by Gaston Leroux. And, like, yeah, well, I guess it could technically be a composition, manuscript would be the word I would go for if I wasn't just going to say the novel by Gaston Leroux. And so I think it's interesting that they phrase it like that, because I think wool over our eyes, they were trying to pull one over on us. I think they were trying to get away with something by not calling it an adaptation of the novel, because I think they knew that they were doing whatever the heck they wanted and they were not adapting this novel at all. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. I thought I should point it out that they said based on the composition by Gaston Leroux, and then they went and did whatever their hearts so chose. But would they have had the same freedom in their own hearts and minds if they said, well, we're adapting a novel. We should be true to the novel. But if they're like, well, it's a composition, it's a song, jazz, baby, jazz has been invented. It's a throwback to the first video, an outrageously thorough synopsis of Phantom of the Opera. Okay, now the Phantom of the Opera fits in the character of Erique Claudin. Now this is a maskless man, a man without a mask, and a face that is perfect. It has no flaws. It is just the face of a guy. A guy's face, no issues at all. He just is walking around, face out for the whole world to see all day. Every single day of his life. And he has a Q-U-E at the end of his name instead of a K. So he is Erique. Erique instead of Eric. 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 Erique Claudin instead of Eric. No name. Eric. No last name. P of the opera. Instead of Eric the Phantom. And then there's just a blank line because he has no last name. Erique Claudin is a violinist in the opera orchestra. We see him for the first time in the orchestra pit playing violin during that big opening operatic number. And after the director is finished speaking with Christine, he dismisses her and asks if she can send in Erique Claudin, who should be waiting out in the lobby. In this brief interaction between Erique Claudin and Christine,
Mademoiselle, may I speak to you for a minute?
Certainly.
he also comments on the fact that she missed curtain call.
You weren't on the stage tonight for the third curtain calls.
And he's kind of trying to make it feel normal that he's asking this question
Everyone in the theater seems to have noticed it. It's really quite flattering.
by explaining that he's been at the opera for so long that everything and everyone in it has become very important to him. He says it in an almost fatherly way. We'll get into that. What initially seems like a sweet interaction
You're very kind. Good night.
goes a little sour when he calls Christine by her Christian name.
Christine. I'm sorry.
Back in the day, you didn't use somebody's first name unless you were close to them. You were intimate friends or family. So this random coworker calling her Christine instead of Miss Dubois was very forward on his behalf. That is why there is like a suspicious little sting right there. But, you know, she shakes it off. She smiles. She's like, okay, goodbye. Thank you. And Erique Claudin goes into the director's office. Also, if you guys ever see me doing weird things with my hands, like weird little things, it's because I'm afraid to make any gesture that's going to start something like this. To successfully portray the Phantom of the Opera, you gotta make me want to cry. And what follows is 10 to 15 minutes of poor Erique Claudin descending into madness in a heartbreaking way. So they succeed there. Sad. The reason Claudin was called into the director's office was because the director, as he was conducting the opera, he could hear that something was wrong in the violin section. He knows that one of the violinists wasn't playing well, and he assumes that it was Claudin. So he calls Claudin in. He wants him to play a little snippet from the opera they were just performing so he can get an idea of what the issue actually is. But instead of playing a movement from the opera they just performed, Claudin plays a different song, and this is the first time we hear the tune of the Lullaby of the Bells. Based on my limited experience in music theory, a leitmotif, as I understand it, is a recurrent theme throughout a musical or literary composition associated with a particular person, idea, or situation. And anytime we hear this tune going forward, it is in direct relation to Erique Claudin. He plays it very beautifully, and the director's like, maybe it wasn't you. Maybe you're not the issue. That was a very beautiful song. What was it? And Claudin explains that it's a lullaby from Provence.
Perhaps I was wrong.
No, it was you.
And that's when Claudin explains,
It's no use, Maestro. Something has happened to the fingers of my left hand.
at this point, the director has no choice but to let him go because the Paris Opera demands perfection, and Claudin tries to get him to change his mind. He says,
Perhaps it's only temporary. Perhaps it'll get better. I hope so.
but the director apologizes, offers him season tickets to the opera, and says,
No doubt you've saved a tidy little fortune to retire on.
Yes, of course.
Claudin agrees, but somewhat reluctantly, and then he sadly if anybody has a Charlie Brown walk in this movie, it is Erique Claudin. He goes back to his tiny, barren little attic garret apartment where the landlady makes a similar point. She accuses him of being a miser for always ordering the same simple meal and reminds him that he hasn't paid his rent in 6 weeks.
What do you expect to do with your money? Bury it with you? If you do, they'll dig you up and steal it.
Claude Rains can play a sad dude really well.
Marie, you've been very kind. You've been very patient. You'll be paid, I promise you.
My Shayla. My Shayla.
He just comes across as so kind and sweet, and watching this happen to this man is heartbreaking, and everybody's pointing out that he should have a bunch of money because he's been playing for the Paris Opera for such a long time. But look at his apartment, look at what he's ordering to eat. Clearly he doesn't have this money. And the next day we learn that Claudin has been paying for Christine's music lessons with a renowned teacher.
Monsieur Claudin, the lesson is almost over.
I didn't come about that today, mademoiselle.
I could never repay you for what you've done for me.
And this teacher is like the best vocal coach in Paris, I guess, because his lessons are so expensive that Christine could not afford these on her own. All she knows is that an anonymous donor, or even the teacher himself, has been giving her these lessons for free because...
Why, a month's salary wouldn't be enough to pay for one of your lessons.
So Claudin has been doing this anonymously for years, and this is clearly where he's sunk all of his money instead of saving for retirement or paying his rent. Now, these lessons that Claudin pays for are the closest stand-in we have in this version of the story to the Angel of Music, because in this retelling of Phantom of the Opera, there is no long-standing relationship between Christine and the angel, there's no secret lessons through the mirror, there's no promises from her father. All of that has been entirely cut out, and instead we just have him supporting her financially through these anonymously paid for music lessons with a renowned teacher. The reason he came today isn't to listen to Christine like he usually does, but instead to ask the teacher if he'd be willing to continue his lessons with Christine while Claudin secures another position and tries to shop around the concerto that he just spent the last 2 years writing. The teacher starts mocking him. He's like, hey, every violinist has written a concerto, so good luck getting that taken care of, and...
A melody raised might win a young girl like Christine Dubois, if he happened to be the director of an opera company.
But Claudin stops him and says,
We agreed never to discuss my motives.
The teacher tells him no, denies his request, says he has a lot of students willing to pay full price for lessons, so he can't just go around throwing free lessons out at people, but he will meet with Christine a few more times and then tell her she's ready and no longer needs his instruction. And Claudin is like, but she's not ready yet, right? And the teacher actually says if you had the money, she probably would be in a spot where she could start her own career soon. Hearing this and knowing the stakes, Claudin leaves with a heartbreakingly hopeful little,
Desjardins are certain to publish it, and they'll give me a substantial advance. You'll see.
oh,
My Shayla.
Oh my gosh. And we find ourselves at a music publishing house. Night has fallen, Claudin is sitting, waiting in a chair, and the employees are whispering behind him that someone should just tell him to go home, since the publisher, Pleyel, I think his name is, has declared he will see no one that day. Hearing this, Claudin slips downstairs and sneaks into Pleyel's office to look for his manuscript, because he's not going home without that. And we find the publisher, Pleyel, again, I think his name is, working with his beautiful lady assistant on etching a plate for printing. I have to assume it's sheet music. I took a printmaking class in college, that's how I recognize it. One of the projects we did was etching, which is where you would coat a piece of metal with a substance that protected it from the acid, and then you would use a tool to scrape away that protective surface in the design that you wanted. Then you would put the sheet of metal into the pit of, not the pit of acid, you would put the sheet of metal into a little tub of acid, and then it would eat away everything that wasn't protected. Then you could clear off the protective stuff, smear that bad boy with smear that bad boy with ink, run it through a printing press, and boom, you've got a perfect copy of it. So that's what they're doing. I don't know what exactly they're printing, but I recognize the tools of the trade, because I've worked in the field. I made goods, though I offered no services. Okay, anyway, but that's what they're doing. That's how I know what they're doing, because I've done it myself. And Pleyel warns his beautifully dressed lady assistant to
Be careful or you'll burn yourself horribly.
What is it that Chekhov said about a smoking gun? Anyway, the publisher's like, I said I would see no one. Leave me be. Can't you see me and my beautiful lady assistant are printmaking? But Claudin insists. He's like, no, I will not go home until I get my manuscript. So the assistant goes to help him. She looks on the desk. It's not on the desk. It's nowhere in the room. She's like, come back in a couple of days. I'm sure it's going to turn up somewhere. And Claudin is like, no.
You don't understand, mademoiselle. It's the only copy I have. It represents 2 years' work.
And Pleyel, hearing this commotion, comes up, clearly exasperated, and is like, I've seen some of your work, Claudin.
Perhaps some employee has thrown this one into the wastebasket where it belongs.
I don't know, because they just keep looking at this guy, and they're like, how hard should I kick him? Wait, he's on the floor. That's what I'm supposed to do, right? Like, that's what you do with people on the floor? You kick them? You kick me at like the football? Right then, in another room, renowned pianist Franz Liszt, yes, the Franz Liszt they made a Puppet History episode about recently, starts playing a familiar melody. We, the audience, cutting back and forth between Claudin and Liszt, are party to the truth of what's going on. One of the publishing assistants says,
I've tried for years to persuade Pleyel to publish his work, but you know how Pleyel feels about unknown composers.
So he took it directly to Franz Liszt in the hope that if the maestro himself would vouch for it, they might actually be able to get Claudin's concerto published.
Pleyel will publish this, I promise.
So while it seems like thing after thing after thing has gone wrong for Claudin, finally something is on the brink of going right. But Claudin doesn't know any of this. All he knows is that he's been fired. He doesn't have any money. He's about to lose his home. He's no longer able to provide Christine with the anonymous support he's been giving her. And his one hope of getting out of this hole seems to be conveniently missing, only for him to hear it playing in another room.
That's my music.
My music? That's my music.
Thief.
Thief!
You've stolen my music. Thief!
Thief! Oh, gosh. Oh, that hurt my eye. He freaks out, he kills Pleyel, and the baddie in the black dress throws acid right in his face. And keep in mind, this is not a heat of the moment, if I throw this now I can save the man I love sort of maneuver. This is calculated. Her gray-haired old man is on the ground. He's gone. He put on his tap shoes and he shuffled off this mortal coil. Like, he's not here anymore. And what she does is she stops, she looks down, she looks up, and just completely stone-faced, she just... Ooh. Yowza. Claudin, acid eating away at his face, runs off into the night, pursued shortly thereafter by the police, and is forced to sneak down into the sewers, where he throws himself into the fetid sewer water to cool and relieve his open face wounds. Objectively speaking, book Eric's long-standing isolation from any sort of human kindness, his own mother rejecting him and making him wear a mask, his sad pining for Christine and his desire to have a wife that he can walk with on Sundays. This is not as inherently tragic as that, but this sequence of events that we just followed Claudin through does a really great job of highlighting the tragedy of this situation by showing how close Claudin is to things going well or things being better. If he'd been smarter financially, if he hadn't blown all his money on lessons for Christine, it wouldn't matter that he got arthritis or something in his hand and had to lose his job. He would have been set up. He spent 20 years playing violin in the most expensive theater in Paris. The landlady speaking down to him, the publisher telling him his concerto was probably thrown in the trash like all his other garbage submissions. This starts to compound in Claudin's mind. And then the worst part about it is that he misunderstands his own good fortune to the point where he destroys his own life, takes someone else's, and winds up with horrible acid burns. The final straw that breaks the camel's back is actually what would have been a good turn of fortune if he would have held on for just a few more minutes. If he would have stayed in that chair in the lobby for just a few minutes more, everything could have been different for him, and that's the tragedy. And now he is what he is. Like, he's gone. He's not the kind, gentle man who stopped Christine in the hallway and was worried about her health. He's gone off the deep end. He's jumped in the sewers. He is. And then poor, sad, sweet Erique Claudin just goes on a crime spree. First, we learn from the new managers. They do at least allude to a change in management, so that's a nice book-accurate detail.
How could we ever have been induced to accept the management of this place?
We learn that the police are still hunting for Claudin and that Claudin's crimes are reflecting poorly on the opera, and we learn someone, now who could possibly say who this might be, has been stealing from the opera. The master keys are missing, 2 opera masks are gone, and several items have been taken from the opera restaurant, including a cask of pickled pig's feet and vinegar.
It's he. Who? Oh.
One person, the stage manager, says it's the opera ghost. It's just like, okay, we have an opera, we have to have a ghost. But this is not the same situation that we had in the book. In the book, there was a Phantom of the Opera who would cause bad things and who was extorting the managers for money and was an actual, like, entity that people had encountered or at least had seen direct actions from. This is more of a normal haunting where they're like, well, we have an opera, we probably have a ghost, oh, something went wrong, it's the ghost. They're like, Claudin has only been I'm gonna spoil something for you. Claudin is the Phantom of the Opera, okay? Like, sometimes people, like, I think the movie might be trying to be like, who is this mysterious silhouette? We all know who the mysterious silhouette is. Who else needs a cask of pickled pig's feet but the man who just dunked his face in sewer water? He has, and also a mask. You know, it's him. It's him. So Claudin has not been haunting the opera. He's been living in his sad little apartment writing a concerto and paying for music lessons for someone who doesn't know anything about that. So this is just a normal ghost, but this normal ghost is described as having a
long nose and a big red beak. You make me nervous.
So that's crime number 1 in his spree.
Pickled pig's feet and 2,500 rooms. What is the opera coming to?
Crime number 2, we find out that a small statuette/bust of Christine was found in Claudin's apartment. Now, this scene kicks off at Christine's apartment with Anatole packing up a folder like they just wrapped up a lesson because he did say he was going to help her, and Christine is mindlessly humming and playing a tune. Hear those bells ringing. A familiar tune. Soft and low. Bring, ding, ding.
What is it?
It's a lullaby of Provence. I've known it all my life. I've known it all my life. I've known it all my life.
She's known it all her life. Remember, a leitmotif is a recurring musical theme associated with a particular person. We're going to put a pin in that. So here's the thing. When it comes to Raoul and Anatole, it's very strange the way they split these men up. It's like they took the character of Raoul from the book and just cracked him in half and made him two separate people. And they gave all of the aspects of Raoul's character in the book that a lot of people dislike, his cockiness, his brazenness, the times he tries to tell Christine what to do, and they gave that and Raoul's name to Inspector Raoul d'Aubert. But then they took all the good aspects of Book Raoul's character, his sweetness, his charm, his kindness, and they gave that to Anatole. And then they took all the good traits from the Phantom, like his talent for music, the bond that Christine and the Phantom share over music, the way that the Phantom train and assist Christine in her career, and they also gave those traits to Anatole. So in Anatole, they basically made Christine's perfect man, all the charm of childhood sweetheart Raoul, with none of the class issues, and all of the music of the Phantom minus the obsession and murder. Meanwhile, they've given the Phantom these undetermined motives when it comes to his obsession over Christine. Like I said, pin. We're putting a pin in this. I'm going to pick it up in the trivia section. But let me just say, in Claudin's interaction with Christine at the beginning of the movie, he makes it clear that he cares about all the opera. He says it in an almost fatherly way. And then when the voice teacher tries to allude to Claudin pursuing Christine romantically, Claudin stops him and is like, no, we won't discuss my motives. But then, in this scene, when Inspector Raoul d'Aubert arrives and he interrupts Anatole and Christine's delightful rendition of the Lullaby of the Bells,
I must see you alone, Christine. I'm here on business from the Sûreté.
So the reason Raoul is at the apartment is because he needs to question Christine about the nature of her relationship with Claudin, because they found a bust of Christine in Claudin's apartment. And a couple things happen. One, Christine is like, I don't know him. We've talked a handful of times. He's always been a little strange, but I figured that's just his personality. I don't know. He just seemed like a sweet, weird old man. Just a sweet old guy who was just a little off, but was kind enough. The bust, it turns out, was actually sculpted by Anatole. And like, Anatole will not keep his hands off this bust in this scene.
So that's what became of it.
Be good enough to explain yourself, monsieur.
Certainly. That statuette is mine.
Yours?
Definitely. I made it.
And Raoul is like, you carved this, you sculpted this bust of Christine? Christine, how many times have we gone to dinner and you didn't tell me that you sat for this sculpture? And Christine's like, I never sat for this sculpture. And Anatole's like, yeah, she didn't. I just did it from my memory and some sketches I drew. And most bonkers of all, Nelson Eddy, who plays Anatole, like the actor and singer who plays romantic interest Anatole, actually sculpted the bust of Christine. Like, at least according to the trivia page on IMDb, Nelson Eddy sculpted the bust of Christine. So like when he says Anatole sculpted it, Anatole really did. In all universes, Anatole sculpted this bust.
My compliments on your versatility, monsieur.
So when Anatole is like, oh my gosh, the bust I made of Christine, that's where it went. He's like, Raoul, think about it. Isn't it obvious? Claudin, sitting there night after night watching Christine on stage.
Claudin probably fell in love with her.
I'm afraid that even the obvious often needs confirmation.
We've got weird fatherly overtones on one end with just like their interaction, with the way he stopped the teacher. But then over here with Raoul and Anatole, we've got the theory proposed that it's romantic love. Later in the movie, he calls Christine my child.
You will stay here with me, my child?
But then he also in the same breath is like,
She didn't know how much I love you.
which could be taken several ways. So it's just like, in this, the final cut of 1943's The Phantom of the Opera, it's very unclear what kind of love exactly that the Phantom has for Christine. And all we know for sure is that Erique Claudin's leitmotif, the harbinger of his presence, a tune that haunts the narrative in his honor, is a song that Christine has known her entire life, a lullaby from Provence. which Claudin is also from. That's, there we go. Those are our crimes that the Phantom has committed so far. He will go on to commit further crimes. He's not done. His spree is far from over, I assure you. This scene is also really fantastic because the whole time Anatole and Raoul are in the room with Christine, they're just like throwing barbs at each other.
A lullaby. It didn't seem very effective as a lullaby.
No doubt you lack assurance.
No doubt.
It's just so fun. It's so fun watching these two bicker and argue and try and one-up each other for Christine's favor. The dynamic, exquisite. It is one of the best aspects of this movie. And what we lose in terms of tragedy, what we lose in terms of gothic horror by turning this movie into a rom-com, we gain in comedy by the antics of these two delightful men.
You're giving it to me?
Yes.
Then I'll accept it as a gift from both of you.
Au revoir, Christine.
Au revoir.
After you, monsieur.
After you, monsieur.
So, it's night at the opera just before a big performance. Biancaroli is hoping to win Anatole back,
Monsieur Garron, yes, I did say.
and everything seems to be going normal. Save for the sight of our shadowy phantom silhouette, and
Christine,
a mysterious voice speaking to Christine in her dressing room.
you're going to be a great and famous singer. I'll help you.
This is the only nod to the lessons with the angel speaking from beyond the mirror, the voice. This is the only nod we get to that aspect of the books. Christine is rattled as we go backstage, and we catch sight of a bottle being switched on a tray while everyone is singing. So Christine, looking harried and confused, comes strolling up to the stage, super late, by the way, only to stop when she hears Anatole say the exact same words the ghost said.
Christine, you're going to be a great and famous singer. I'll help you.
Now, there's this light attempt to cast suspicion on Anatole that I don't think it's very effective because we know Claudin is right there. If it's meant to be a red herring for us, it's not well executed. If it's meant to be a red herring for the people in the universe, sure, yeah, it does fine. It does fine. I don't know, that moment where the Phantom and Anatole choose to say the same thing.
You mean it was you?
Of course. I don't mean actually, but I've been saying that to you ever since I saw you.
It's just weird. And then the whole, Anatole sculpted her. Like I said, they gave him some Phantom-like aspects, but it was, only the good stuff. But clearly some of the weird stuff seeped in too, but we love Anatole. We love Anatole. If I had to choose between the two of them, I'm choosing Anatole. I'm just going to say, I'm just being honest. And another thing I've always wondered is why Christine is at the opera in this scene, because the opera's already started, has been going for a while. And she's either not supposed to be in this performance at all and she's just there to observe from the sidelines, or she just has so little regard for curtain calls, either opening or closing, that she's just not on stage again. But as I was writing this, I was like, let me do some math. Let me put 2 and 2 together, and that equals 4. I think it's because in this scene, she's supposed to be at the opera as Biancaroli's understudy just in case anything happens. And it's fortunate that she is there because something happens to Biancaroli. So Christine gets bundled into a spare costume for the lead role and takes over. She entrances the entire opera, including a masked Claudin, who listens as her beautiful voice filters from the opera down to his kingdom below the stage, echoing angelically against the ragged rocks of his underground lair. Yes, that is how I will describe that. When Biancarolli wakes up, and she doesn't take too long to wake up, like Christine is still on stage mid-song, and they're like, Biancarolli, you cannot leave this room. And she's like, let me out there, let me start singing. She immediately accuses Christine and Anatole of being the ones to drug her. She says they're in cahoots, and she says the only way she won't press charges against the both of them, the only way she'll forget on the opera's behalf that she was drugged mid-performance, is if she gets a new understudy, if Christine is bumped back down to the chorus for the remaining 2 years of Biancarolli's contract, and the newspapers have to be contacted and told not to report on Christine's performance at all.
Nothing happened tonight. I wasn't drunk, and Christine Dubois didn't sing.
This is reluctantly agreed to by all parties, but it does not go over well with the Phantom, who tells Biancarolli to get out of town. Christine will be taking over, and when Biancarolli is like, no, I'm Biancarolli. Take off that mask when you're talking to me.
Take off that opera mask.
He then attacks Biancarolli and kills her.
Madame Biancarolli and her maid have been murdered.
Murdered?
In all the hullabaloo post Biancarolli and her maid getting taken out of the picture entirely, rest in peace to a queen and a diva, Anatole, in his white-lined cape, sees Claudin in his red-lined cape, and Anatole gives chase. Good versus evil, visual storytelling. But when Raoul sees Anatole running, he starts chasing Anatole, thinking that Anatole is fleeing the scene.
You saw him yourself, didn't you?
No, monsieur. I was chasing you.
Now, if you're anything like me, and the 10 to 15 minute sequence from the director's office to Claudin diving open wound faced first into the sewers really bummed you out, you may be asking, like I asked, and like my friend who was watching the movie with me asked, doesn't this seem outrageously out of character for what seemed like a sad, gentle, sweet man? And sure, yes, it did seem watching that like everybody was just kicking this poor guy while he was down, but then, you step back, and you give it some thought, and you're like, okay, this is a man who had never spoken to Christine outside of a few short interactions with her, to the point where when Raoul was like, what's the nature of your relationship? She's like,
I encountered him a few times in the foyer or on the stage or outside the opera, but that's all.
like that is it. In her mind, he's just a guy who plays violin over there. She knows him because he's over there playing violin. That's it. Meanwhile, he has been wandering the opera, going into other people's dressing rooms, stealing their personal property when that property happened to bear a striking resemblance to Christine, and he financially ruined himself for Christine's sake. And that was all before he snapped. He'd never talked to her, and every penny he had went to her career, which is both sweet and disturbing. Like, she never asked for you to destitute yourself, sir. So sad as he seemed, he was already a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So then you pile everything on that happened. A little off topic, but in the Batman comic, The Killing Joke, the Joker's origin story is given. And I think it's still debated whether or not this is his true origin story. As far as I know, I don't think the Joker's origin has ever 100% been confirmed, but this is like a potential origin story. But the point of his origin story in The Killing Joke is to show the Joker spiraled into madness after one bad day. And that's what we see happen to Erique Claudin, a seemingly normal, sad, sweet man snapping after one very bad day. But if you look at the context, if you look at sort of the path that led him to this bad day, he'd already been primed for madness by letting himself get so obsessed with Christine that it destroyed his own life in the process. His one bad day tipped the already exceedingly precarious balance of his life past the point of no return. The final threshold. Yeah, maybe it didn't initially seem like it was in character, but I think actually, if we take a look at the journey, we'll see that it does. Anyway, with Biancarolli and her maid as Claudine's second and third victims, Raoul's suspicions as inspector are firmly split between Claudine and between Anatole. He thinks it could be either one of them. The opera is temporarily shut down, and the managers receive a demand from the Phantom that Christine take over as lead in Biancarolli's stead, and two separate plans are formed. The first plan, Raoul's plan, is to reopen the opera with someone other than Christine in the lead. He'll set up guards all over the stage, he'll even put some in costume, he'll make sure that one guard is specifically assigned to the lead soprano, because he figures that if Christine does sing, the murderer might be appeased and never return. Like, he'll go to ground, he'll disappear, they'll never see or hear from him again, and no justice could be served. So Raoul thinks that they should draw him out by denying his request. The second plan, Anatole's plan, takes a different approach. Anatole thinks Christine should sing. He thinks it's necessary that she sing to draw the Phantom out. But she specifically needs to sing Claudine's concerto, which Anatole has arranged to be played and conducted by the great Franz Liszt. Anatole, having done a little detective work, figures that this all started because Claudine's concerto was rejected. So by presenting the pairing of Christine singing and his concerto being played, this should draw him out and allow them to capture him.
So many crimes have been committed in the name of music.
And Liszt agrees.
It seems only fair to use it now to avert one.
And I think it's because he feels a little bit responsible, as it was his playing, it was Liszt playing the concerto that pushed the already unstable Claudine over the edge. So what ends up happening is a hybrid of both plans. Another soprano with a lot of moxie will perform the actual opera.
How is Madame Lorenzi?
Oh, she's enjoying it. Nothing will keep her from singing now.
Madame Lorenzi, I trust you're entirely composed?
Composed? What are you talking about?
But after the performance, Franz Liszt will play the concerto. So you kind of like, you get the best of both worlds. But in this new scenario, Christine will not be singing. So realistically, she should have just stayed at home. If they want her to be safe, she should just stay at home. But instead, she shows up to the opera anyway in a gorgeous dress because she wants to watch the performance. She's a fan of the opera. She's a fan of the new lead.
But I couldn't stay away. We're introducing a new opera, and Madame Lorenzi's a great artist.
We love a girl's girl. We love women supporting women. We actually don't like it when girls take stupid risks, because you didn't have to come to the opera, Christine. You could have stayed at home. But I digress. I digress. We get to see her in that gorgeous dress. For good or for ill, Christine is in the opera house. So we had to get to the finale somehow. And as everybody's preparing to go on stage, the opera's getting ready to start, we see that the costumed on-stage guards, who are going to be sort of patrolling as everybody's singing, are wearing the same masks as the Phantom, because remember, he stole a couple masks from the opera's costume department. So not the best move anybody could have made, but maybe they didn't know. Nobody's really seen Claudine since what happened. They don't know. They don't know. So after this is established, Claudine, the Phantom, sneaks up behind one of the guards, nooses him, shades of the Punjab lasso, anyone? And he replaces his own dramatic cape with one of the, like, jacket cloaks that everybody's wearing on stage. Also, if you guys ever see me doing weird things with my hands, like weird little things, and then he sneaks up, it's because I'm afraid to make any gesture that's going to start something like this. And then he sneaks up to where Chandelier is to start sawing at the massive... No! I know I'm using that boom sound effect way too much in this video, but honestly, I just don't care. It's making me laugh. Me. Then he sneaks up to where the chandelier is to start sawing at the massively thick links of chain that are holding up the chandelier. The chandelier, it doesn't even start shaking till like really far into his sawing. You would think it would start swinging the second he touches the saw to it, but it's not till sort of the end. and the chandelier crashes, then we'll have her go, ah! And in the chaos, Claudin goes to Christine, and after convincing her that he's one of the guards, he leads her below the stage.
Where's Inspector Dubois?
He's investigating the cause of the accident. I will look after you.
Now, she picks up on the fact that he isn't a guard just a tiny bit too late, like right when they're at the gate that leads downstage, and he's like,
Don't be frightened. I'll watch over you. I've always watched over you. Come.
and she finds herself being led through the dark, crumbling bowels of the sewers and catacombs beneath the Paris Opera House.
It's beautiful down there. Beautiful. See? Didn't I tell you it was beautiful? You'll love it here when you get used to the dark. It's right under the opera. The music comes down and the darkness distills it.
Just long enough for Christine to be like out of grasp of immediate rescue. Raoul and Anatole realize that Christine is missing. So Anatole has Liszt start playing the concerto.
More than just a performance of a new concerto. The whole future of the Paris Opera may depend upon it.
At this point, we sort of start bouncing between Christine and the Phantom in the Phantom's lair, and Raoul and Anatole on their way to the lair. And the two of them give chase below, pointing out that the whole place is on the verge of collapsing. Meanwhile, Claudin is like, we're going to live here forever, Christine. With my bucket of pickled pig's feet, we'll sing and we'll be happy. Then Claudin hears his concerto. He's like, my music, my concerto.
My concerto. My concerto.
And he sits down and he starts playing along with it. And Christine, you know, she was already nervous and scared because she just got kidnapped. But then she's like, I know this song. So while he's playing along with his concerto that has this leitmotif of this lullaby that Christine has known her entire life, the Phantom bids Christine to start singing, and she does. Christine, confused, scared, and rattled by the fact that she recognizes the lullaby of the bells in this concerto, approaches the Phantom, rips off his mask, we get a good look at his face, and she starts backing away from him. And then, immediately after, Raoul and Anatole show up. The Phantom raises his sword, Raoul shoots at him, and the whole building starts to collapse. And Raoul, Anatole, and Christine flee, while the Phantom is trapped by the rubble. Another piece of trivia for you. In this scene where Raoul and Christine and Anatole are fleeing, apparently the actors playing Raoul and Anatole were considered too important to risk during that stunt, so only Susanna Foster is in that scene. The other two are stunt doubles. You know, sure, put the girl in the beautiful dress in danger. That's not... whatever, it's fine. Anyway, when the three of them get to a point of safety, Christine is like,
He called out his concerto, and yet it's written around the melody of my song.
and Anatole replies,
Who was he?
He came from your district, in Provence.
and Christine's like, okay, well, poor weirdo. He was so sad. I feel bad for him and sort of connected to him in a way, but mostly I just feel bad for him.
His suffering and madness will be forgotten. His music, his concerto, will remain.
I think the final lair scene is a little bit of a cop-out, but we'll get to that. We circle back to the lair very briefly here, getting a shot of the mask and the violin in the rubble, showing that poor Erique Claudin is truly gone. But this is not quite the end. We do get a sort of epilogue where we see Christine just finishing a show as lead.
You are magnificent tonight. Thank you, Celeste. I was good, wasn't I? Oh.
And based on her costume and the wig that the maid's holding, you can tell that she was in a performance of Faust. This was done intentionally, where they wanted to bring in the Faust of it all, but Faust was a copyrighted work and they were trying to save money because it was World War II. So instead, they put her in a Faust costume. Like if you look at what Mary Philbin wore in the Faust scenes in the 1925 silent film, and you look at the costume that Susanna Foster is wearing in this scene, it's obvious that she was playing Marguerite, and you can see that from the wig as well. So I think that's really neat. But she comes in, she's feeling good, she's feeling like she's a success, and Anatole and Raoul both show up to congratulate her. They give her the exact same bouquet of flowers, and both invite her to dinner.
You two know each other, of course.
Of course.
Well, to make it, to be accurate, actually, Anatole gets to the dressing room first, invites Christine to dinner. Christine says, "Oh, I already have dinner plans with Raoul," and Anatole's like,
That policeman.
then Raoul shows up. They both give her the exact same bouquet of roses, and Christine's like,
I have an idea. Why can't we three have supper together?
I'm hitting pause so I can say, now remember, much like Archie Andrews spent almost the entire series of Riverdale asking himself the question, football or music, even as his friends were fighting organ harvesting cults being run by Chad Michael Murray in an Evel Knievel jumpsuit, or, starting secret speakeasies under Pop's chocolate shop, Christine, in that same way, has spent this whole movie asking herself, music or romance, while the events of Phantom of the Opera took place? Will Christine choose her art as represented by Anatole, who would provide a life centered around what they're both passionate about? Or will she choose a normal life as represented by intelligent, caring Raoul, who would provide companionship and love, even if he doesn't quite understand that more artistic side to her nature? Well, she chooses neither. She suggests that they all get dinner together. The boys say she is going to have to choose between the two of them. Like, no, they aren't all three going to go to dinner. She needs to make a decision then, music or football. But instead, a secret third option opens itself up when she hears the clamor of the crowd calling her name in the hallway.
Excuse me.
And she leaves them both in the dressing room to collect her accolades from her adoring public. And then Raoul says,
You join me for a bit of supper at the Café de l'Opéra?
With pleasure, monsieur.
and so arm in arm, the two of them bumping into each other in the door one last time.
After you, monsieur.
After you, monsieur.
The two of them go to dinner. The end. Woo! Okay, all right, let's get into some trivia and I think some of my favorite moments from this film. Hear those bells ringing so, trivia-wise, remember that pin? Remember that pin? Remember that pin that I said, pin that, we're going to circle back? We're removing the pin and we're looking at the butterfly? Is that what we pin? No. We remove the pin and we're looking at the paper that I stuck to the cork board and we're turning it over and we're going over what I learned. There we go, not a butterfly. All right, so the first thing we need to address is the lullaby of the bells and what it portends. As I mentioned, a leitmotif is a recurring theme for a specific person or event. Think the Imperial March for Darth Vader. And in this movie, the Lullaby of the Bells is clearly Erique Claudin's leitmotif. Anytime we hear it makes it very clear that something pertaining to Claudin is about to happen or is happening. So the fact that Christine recognizes the song, knows the song, has known the song her entire life is very interesting and would of course suggest some sort of connection between Claudin and Christine. But it doesn't ever really explain what kind of love the Phantom has for Christine. There's like an aspect to it that doesn't seem fully romantic, which is what the Phantom usually is. And that's because in the original script for this version of the movie, Erique Claudin was meant to be Christine's father, who abandoned his baby and her mother to pursue a career in music. And then Christine's mom would have then died of a broken heart, and Christine would have been raised by her aunt. All of that is taken out of the final cut of the movie. None of that is included. We know nothing about Christine's backstory. All of that got cut when the whole twist reveal of him being her dad got cut. Now, there are some echoes of this remaining. Like in the scene where he's taking her down to the final lair, he says,
I've always helped you, haven't I? You'll stay here with me, my child? Won't you? Now you'll sing for me, and I'll play.
and that's sort of like, you know, that could be interpreted as fatherly. But the reason that got cut was because instead of that explaining his motives and making his actions seem more wholesome and pure, which would match with like the sad man we see at the beginning, it started to make his obsession read as incestuous. Like it was still coming across as somewhat romantic, even with the explanation that it was her dad. So they're like, no, cut it, quit. And rightly so, cut that out. Like, why would you make that change? That's insane, because the source material, the book is right there. And it's clear in the source material that the Phantom is romantically obsessed with Christine to the point that he is going to try to force her to marry him. So it's super weird that they're like, what if we had the same thing, similar framework, similar vibes, but it's her dad? No. So they course corrected. They cut that out. They said, no, actually, that's a terrible idea. Let's stop. But the problem is, because that was the foundation upon which this script was built, it leaves this ominous dad-shaped vacuum in the film that makes the Phantom's motives sort of unclear and muddled. Like, say what you will about his actions and decisions, but the Phantom in the book he had a plan, he had a goal, and he was clearly stating his goals. He's like, this is my 5-year plan. Year 1, I train Christine in music, I lure her down below, I get married to her in the Madeleine. Year 2, we get a house above ground. Years 3 through 5, we spend the rest of our lives singing music and taking walks on Sunday, and everything's perfect, and I'm finally loved for myself. Clear, defined goals. But here, it's just kind of like, I'm going to financially ruin myself for this woman, and I'll never tell why. I just think it was strange. I think some rewrites, could have benefited from that. Some clarity. If you were going to pivot away from the dad decision, which was the right decision, change a couple things up. Add a little bit more structure. Build better to the end. Okay, so next, as just a reminder, this is in fact an off-the-shelf review where I take a DVD off my shelf and review it. And one thing I like to do in those videos is go through the special features. And one thing that this movie had was a little documentary called The Opera Ghost, A Phantom Unmasked. And it was like 40 minutes long, but it was really good. And I actually did find it on YouTube. So if you guys want to watch it, it's a lot of fun. It'll be in the Google Doc. It was really interesting. It sort of went into the history of the Phantom of the Opera, and it featured some information about the 1925 silent film, some references to the 1960s film, which we're going to get into next time. It had interviews with Susanna Foster, who played Christine. It had interviews with Carla Laemmle, who was friends with Mary Philbin, who played Christine in the 1925 film. Claude Rains' daughter spoke about her dad. One thing I will say is, having watched this documentary produced by Universal Studios, I'm happy to report that my information included in the 1925 silent film is sound. Do you have something to say? You have something to add? Yes. Everything they said was something that I said, except for the stuff that was extra that I had not known about. Basically, what I'm saying is that it didn't prove anything I said wrong, which I was really happy about. There were things in this documentary that I learned that it was exciting and new, but the things that I did say in my video are canon to real life. Holy cow. I can't talk anymore. Anyway, I was just really relieved to not be like, oh gosh, I made terrible errors all the way through. I didn't make terrible errors. My information was sound. The only thing I got wrong was the pronunciation of everybody's name. His name is Carl Laemmle. And I made a 4-hour long video and an 1 and 50-minute long video where I called him Lamel the whole time. I didn't lie to anybody. Now on to makeup stuff, because that is always going to factor into Phantom of the Opera in one way or another. A couple neat facts I learned was, one, Nelson Eddy, who played Anatole, is actually blonde. And I guess he was kind of iconically blonde. And if he took this role, he was going to have to dye his hair black. And he only agreed to take the role when Jack Pierce, who was like a very well-known makeup artist, developed a temporary dye that was able to wash out each night. So that was when he decided to take on the role of Anatole. And I will say, in the documentary, they never mention Raoul. Like, clearly Anatole was meant to be her romantic love interest. Like, that was the Raoul of this movie, even though they had a Raoul named Raoul d'Aubert, who was equally a love interest. They made no mention of him in the documentary at all. To the point where Norman Carey, who played Raoul in the 1925 silent film, visited the set and shook hands with Nelson Eddy because Nelson Eddy was like the spiritual successor of the role that Norman Carey had played. So it's like, why is everybody acting like they didn't give Christine 2 love interests in this movie? They're like, oh yes, Nelson Eddy and Susanna Foster and Claude Rains, they were the only people in this movie. And I was like, no, you had a man named Raoul who was also there. Just don't try to walk back these decisions you made. My binkus? Okay. That was Nelson Eddy's makeup fact. Claude Rains' makeup fact, who actually played the Phantom, is that Claude Rains, I don't know if you know this, but he's been pulling double shifts at the Universal Monster Factory because he was also the Invisible Man before he took on the role of the Phantom. But when he took on the role of Phantom, he stipulated that he didn't want to wear a crazy amount of prosthetic makeup because he didn't want to start getting typecast as that kind of character actor. He'd already been the Invisible Man wrapped in bandages. He didn't want to also be the Phantom in a completely unrecognizable face. Like, this guy had just been in Casablanca. Casablanca came out in 1942. Like, at the end, when Rick and the cop are walking off and the woman, I haven't seen it in years, flew off on the plane, he's the cop walking off with him. Like, he's like, this is the start of a beautiful friendship. So he had a plan in mind for his career, and it did not include becoming a character actor. So his facial makeup was much less extreme than Lon Chaney's. But final little bit of trivia was another thing the documentary told me. It was kind of going into sort of Phantom-like spin-offs that happened later. And so I found out there's a movie called The Climax, which I now own, because I had to know. So the synopsis presented to me was Boris Karloff in a Phantom-like role, Susanna Foster returning in a Christine-like role in a theater setting where she is a soprano and he is obsessed with her and her voice because, and he's got like a secret hidden dead wife in the basement. She reminds him of his secret hidden dead wife. Blah, 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 blah. I don't care. I needed to know what happened, so I purchased it because I couldn't find it anywhere on streaming, and now it's mine to own forever. I will not go into all the details, but what I will say is that this movie's insane for the simple fact that it is like the anti-Phantom of the Opera. They should be so similar. They are both gothic romances. They both involve like dark obsession set in a theater and a soprano in distress. But the Phantom of the Opera and Boris Karloff's opera doctor, who's like in charge of making sure none of the singers have issues with their throats, they are on two opposite ends of the I love my soprano soon-to-be wife even if she doesn't know we're about to get married spectrum. Erique, the Phantom of the Opera, adores Christine's voice. Christine's voice is the most important thing to him. It's what drew him to her initially. He wants to hone that voice, shape it into all that it can be, give her a beautiful career, and then he falls in love with her and wants to marry her, and it's like she and her voice and all of it just is all together, and he just loves it. It's one end of the spectrum. All the way over here is this dude, and he hates music. He hates his soprano, almost soon-to-be wife who doesn't know it yet's voice. He goes up to her and he's like, I am like this first 10 minutes of the movie, he's like, I'm sick of you singing. I hate that other men can listen to you sing and look at your beautiful face for the price of a ticket. I want you to stop. And she's like, I am so good at my job that the king literally just commanded me to perform to him in a few days. Like, I have a command performance from the king. I have worked very hard for this. I am not going to, like, be shut up in a little box, okay? And he's like, listen, hold on a minute. I am her. Now I'm him. The only thing standing between me now is your voice. And I can get rid of it. As simple as this. And then Susanna Foster's character shows up like 10 years later. Nobody suspects, oh, Marcelina, she's missing. Nobody suspects the poor opera doctor who lost his mind and who every day goes to her dressing room to sit there and stare into empty space and mourn her. He couldn't possibly know anything about this. He's just a sad old man. So he's leaving the opera one day and he hears a voice that sounds exactly like Marcelina's voice, and he goes in, it's Susanna Foster. He like eventually he like lures her to his office and he hypnotizes her and he's like, you won't sing anymore. That voice doesn't belong to you. I'm returning it to Marcelina. It has to be silenced forever. He just hates it. He hates her voice. And like by the end, he actually like her fiance tries to get her to sing again, and she like it's like a back and forth struggle. Will she sing? Will she not? And by the end, he has her in the chair, hypnotized, and he grabs like a scalpel, and he's gonna cut her voice out if he has to. And he has Marcelina in like a glass coffin in a vault in his house. So no romance between him and the lead. He hates music. This man hates music, but it is still a dark obsession set in an opera, specifically the same 1925 opera set from the original Phantom of the Opera movie. And when I was looking at reviews on Letterboxd, and you can read my full review on Letterboxd, most people were saying that this movie was originally supposed to be a sequel to the 1943 film, but Claude Rains wasn't able to come back. And that makes a lot of sense when you watch the movie because Susanna Foster is in a very Christine-like role. The woman who played Bianca Rolli in the 1943 film, she's back in a Carlotta-like role. And so it's like you can see where the people who could return did return, but when Claude Rains couldn't make it back, they just sort of reworked the idea to be similar settings, similar vibes, but different story. And so it was very interesting. I would love to go over it in more detail. I think I've probably given too much detail as it is for, shoehorning this into a review of the 1943 film, but it was interesting. And I own it now. And yeah, it was just cool to see because they definitely did reuse the 1925 set again. So another one. That kind of brings us to the end of the trivia. This movie, like I said, is a really great romantic comedy. And in telling the synopsis, I wasn't able to really fit in some of my favorite moments from it. I'm just going to sort of rapid fire throw those at you. So first, there are lots of moments through the film where people are like, Christine, pay attention to music. Think about your career. This is one of them.
Music is first. Music is everything.
And he's like, you need to make sure that you're paying attention to your music and not anything else. And she's like,
I understand.
You don't understand. Women never understand. But they are docile.
what does that mean?
Women never understand. But they are docile.
Woo! And then, right when the chandelier crashes, you see a man carry a woman past the fallen chandelier, and it reminded me of the chandelier crash from the 1925 movie, and I think they might have recreated that scene as like an homage. And then finally, I already mentioned how much I love Christine's final lair dress, but I have not said how much I love Christine's dress from her first performance in a lead role. This mint green number that both she and Bianca Rolli wear, beautiful. All right, so now that we've finished trivia and some of my favorite moments, let's get into the rankings. Hear those bells ringing in the trivia on IMDb, there was a reviewer named Tony Ryan who was quoted as saying this movie had too much opera, not enough Phantom, and I find that apt. Apt to what? Well, apt to what you wish. Exactly so. You're not gonna, you don't get that yet. We have about 50 more years of Phantom to get through before what I just said is gonna make sense, unless you're already a fan of culture, like me. If you recognize that, tell me what movie it's from. Let's start ranking. Just as a reminder, there are 6 elements we will be basing the accuracy on. 1, overall adherence of the plot to the source material. 2, Christine's outfit when the Phantom kidnaps her for the first time. 3, the unmasking scene. 4, the appearance of the mask. 5, Eric's unmasked face. And the 6th item, of course, is the final lair scene. So, overall adherence to the plot is going to be the heaviest hitter in this, making up 30% of the final score. And on the whole, this movie does not do well at all in terms of adherence to the plot. It changes the nature and origin of the Phantom's disfigurement from something Eric was born with, and all of the nuance and tragedy that comes with that, like even just considering the fact that his mother couldn't even bear to look at him and gave him a mask. That kind of lifelong trauma to a acid burn, which is severely traumatic in its own way, like not to downplay that at all, but it's like in terms of this story, in terms of the character of the Phantom and what battles these two are battling, you've got 3 weeks of wearing a mask versus a man who's probably in his like 50s, who's been wearing a mask his whole life. They're fighting different battles is all I'm saying, and that it changes the nature of the plot. The movie changes Christine's origins. In fact, in the final cut of the film, it gives her no origin at all since they scrapped the dad idea. Thank God. And rightly so. She's just a French singer who is too pretty and too talented. Men just are falling at her feet. She's not Swedish. She's not dealing with the trauma of her father's passing. She never had lessons with the Angel of Music, and the subsequent betrayal of finding out that the Angel of Music was just a man. None of that is something that Christine Dubois needs to deal with. She's just mostly having a nice time flirting with 2 boys who both like her a lot. Music or football, who can say? Also, she briefly got kidnapped for like 8 minutes, so that was hard. That was a rough and scary time. Of course it would be. Of course it would. I'm not making light of people being kidnapped. That would be terrible no matter how long it lasted. But I'm just saying, in terms of the plot, if we're comparing Christine's plight in the book, where she spent 3 months being lied to by the Phantom and then 2 weeks in his house against her will, and then another few weeks or months under close observation while she was having a fake engagement with the man she actually liked at the behest of the man who's going to force her to marry him, and all the while is also performing on stage. Then we've got Christine Dubois over here, and she's like, hey guys, I have a boyfriend who works outside of the opera, but there's a guy who works in the opera who seems like he might be into me. I don't know who to choose. Both are very good options. And then there's that hi nice old man who is worried why I didn't come to Curtin. I'm fine. Thank you for asking. You're very sweet. And somebody's paying for my music lessons, and I don't have to worry about that, so that's really cool. And I got to sing instead of Bianca Rowley one night, which was nice. And I mean, she got a little mad, but it's okay because it's all going to work out. And I got kidnapped. That was really traumatizing, and it was very scary for me. But then I was Marguerite in Faust, and I just feel like I'm doing really well, and I don't actually need to think about boys right now. So I don't know. I'm Christine Dubois. Thank you. They're fighting different battles. That's all. And again, there are 2 love interests, and Raoul is not a child sweetheart or a vicomte. In fact, the whole structure of the story is changed. The major beats that you get in the book, the farewell gala, Joseph Bouquet's murder, the meeting between Raoul and Christine in her dressing room, the trip to Perros-Guirec, the Angel of Music, Christine's first abduction to the house by the lake, the masquerade, the Apollo's lyre scene, and Raoul and Christine's first kiss, Caesar the horse, the Faust of it all, the grasshopper and the scorpion, the torture chamber, the poor sweet Persian, all of it cut, all of it gone. None of it even, like, aside from, like, a handful of the barest allusions to the idea of something that might have just been mentioned, like him being like,
you're going to be a great and famous singer,
from somewhere outside of her dressing room. Nothing. It's all gone. The only things that actually remain the same between the book and the 1943 Phantom of the Opera is that her name is Christine, she has at least one romantic interest named Raoul, the Phantom wears a mask and is subsequently unmasked, and the chandelier crashes. And for those 5 elements, I will give it 5 points. 5 out of 30. Christine's outfit when the Phantom first kidnaps her. Well, seeing as the Phantom only kidnaps her one time in this movie, this ranking is moot. It doesn't matter because it doesn't exist. Her dress in the final lair scene is exquisite. But because they never staged Faust to save money on the copyrighted music because it was World War II, Christine never played Sybil. So she never even had the opportunity to be charmingly dressed in boys' clothes, even if she had the opportunity of being kidnapped more than once. So, 0 out of 5. The unmasking scene, an important aspect to the story worth 15% of the final tally. This version was very anticlimactic. In the book, the reason he's wearing a mask is a mystery to both Christine and the reader, and it's only in that terrible unmasking scene that we realize why he wears it, and his violent reaction to the unmasking is one of the most horrifying and unsettling scenes in the entire book. By giving the Phantom a new origin story that, while extremely well done and very heartbreaking, not only shows us what happens to his face, but makes the injury the consequence of his own actions, it takes away the somewhat justified anger and bitterness that book Eric has towards the world at large. It makes the unmasking itself somewhat pointless. It feels almost redundant, like it was left in simply because this is Phantom of the Opera, and in order for it to be Phantom of the Opera, then the Phantom must at some point be unmasked. Instead of being a huge moment in the plot, a reveal, a resolution to a mystery, it's just rushed and lackluster. There's no great buildup of suspense. The audience has an idea of what the injury might look like already since we were there when it happened, and the Phantom himself gives no reaction to the unmasking. He just stands really still so that the camera can get a good shot of what prosthetic makeup Claude Rains allowed. So, definitely not the best unmasking I've seen. But what I will say is that he did wear a mask. He did have something going on with his face under the mask, and the mask did get taken off. Now, it may seem like those things would be a major factor of the story of Phantom of the Opera, so of course that's going to happen, but I assure you, there is at least one version where a beautiful Phantom with a flawless face and no mask and the ability to telepathically communicate with rats exists. So, credit where credit is due, I guess. 3 out of 15. The appearance of the mask, worth 15% of the final tally. In the book, the mask was black and had the barbe du masque cloth. This mask was blue. It had no barbe du masque, but really I don't think any other adaptation but the 1925 film includes that. But what I will say for this mask is that it's the right general shape. Like, I know Andrew Lloyd Webber popularized the half mask. In like the book adaptation, it's a half mask where it covers the upper half of his whole face. This definitely had the same shape and feel of the book accurate mask. It was blue though, so no points for color, I guess. You know what? Close enough. I'll give it a 12 out of 15. Next is Eric's unmasked face, another crucial aspect of the story worth 15% of the final tally. And I'm going to have to give a bad grade here as well, because first, the origin and the scarring and the fact that it happened like 3 weeks prior to the final lair scene means this dude had zero chance to develop lifelong issues over his appearance, which is a very big part of the Phantom's personality. Second, the fact that it is scarring instead of him looking like a living skeleton with glowing eyes means that it lacks that inherent tie to the death in the maiden trope from the original book. And third, he has a nose, so. Also, I'm just gonna say, it doesn't strike fear into the heart. His face does not frighten me. Pity, yes. A wish to prescribe Neosporin and Mederma and other various creams and lotions to help with the healing process and the inevitable infection that had to have come after washing his open wound in fetid sewer water? Sure. But His lack of reaction to the unmasking and, the light scabbing, it didn't make me scared. I still just feel kind of bad for the guy. I mean, that's part of it. You should always just kind of feel bad for the guy, but like, he didn't freak out and start screaming and be like, feast your eyes, glut your soul upon my accursed ugliness. And I just feel like that's part of it. 3 out of 15. And with that, we've reached the final lair scene. Very important, worth 20%. And this, rushed. You got to consider that this was actually our only chance to even see the final lair, since we never got the first 2 weeks in the house by the lake like we did in the book. His motives are undetermined because they couldn't decide if this guy was going to be her dad or a third love interest, so he never even tried to force her into matrimony, which is a huge part of the final lair scene, because he just sort of like chose this weird little dilapidated chamber under the opera as a matter of convenience, which, it's concerningly unstable beneath the opera. Like, this is the foundation for the entire opera house. Why is it on the point of collapse? It has no pizzazz, no furniture from his dead mom, no organ, though it does have a piano, no reveal that he's a genius architect that secretly snuck his house into the retaining wall of the underground lake. There is an underground lake, though.
You didn't know we had a lake all to ourselves, did you?
They walk in the room, he has her sit down, he hears his concerto, he plays the piano, she recognizes the song and stands up, he says, "Sing, Christine," she starts singing, walks over to him, this lasts maybe 15-20 seconds, pulls the mask off, you get about 8 seconds of reaction between the two of them where he's just kind of staring at her in shock, she's just backing away slowly in shock, and by the time her back hits the wall, the door is open and Anatole and Raoul are there. Like, it is so quick. And then the Phantom looks at them, raises his sword, Anatole looks at him, shoots around into the ceiling. Everything collapses because apparently the foundation of the opera house is built out of toothpicks and sugar paste, and that's it. Without the threat of the wedding, without the dream of a wife that he can go on walks with on Sundays, his plan just seems half-baked. And I mean, I guess the only plan a man could come up with in 3 weeks while he's living off a barrel of pickled pig's feet would be half-baked. The resolution of her being like, "Aw, poor dude, felt bad for him after those 8 seconds we interacted," and then Anatole being like, "Yeah, poor guy, but at least, the music lives on and rock and roll will never die." It just felt rushed and unsatisfying, and that's because, like that guy said, too much opera, not enough Phantom. We get a good foundation for a tragic Phantom character with Erique Claudin's early scenes, but then the movie takes a sharp pivot and mainly focuses on Raoul and Anatole. I condensed a lot of that, but most of the movie is spent watching these two goofy guys vie over Christine's affections. It's like their rivalry, their romantic pursuit of Christine, and also it's like that and opera numbers, like full-length opera numbers that take up big chunks of screen time. And they're fun and they're great to watch and they're beautiful, but they come at the cost of character and story development. And the extremely truncated journey to the final lair and the final lair scene itself. It makes the Phantom of the Opera plot feel like an afterthought. Like, the story wasn't building to the final lair scene, to this final interaction where the monster becomes a man after a single act of kindness. The whole story was building towards Christine being a girl boss and choosing her career instead of romance. Like, if you watch the movie with that in mind, knowing that that's how it's going to end, you'll see that it's more about Christine learning to focus on her career as these guys vie for her affections rather than the Phantom. The Phantom of the Opera takes a back burner to that plot. And as a consequence to that, the final lair scene feels lackluster and rushed and devoid of the mix of fear and pity that permeates the final lair scene in the book. 3 out of 20. So, for book accuracy, the final tally is 26%, a failure. Like, we might make you repeat the second grade again with these numbers type of F. but let's rank it based on my personal opinion as well. Now, this score will be based on the uniqueness of the take, how much I like the uniqueness of the take, how much the Phantom's fate makes me want to cry at the end, because that's very important, and just basically whether I liked it or not. So last time I ranked each of these by 25%, but I didn't really do anything. Like, I made a graph for the book accuracy, but I didn't really do anything for the book ranking. And because we're only 2 movies deep, I think I want to pivot for this segment, and I'll give my thoughts based on these factors, and then I'll use that to rank it on a tier list. Editing Summer is going to take over this part and tell you everything about the list. Hi, Editing Summer here. I'm going to tell you everything about the list. So let's start by breaking down how the ranking system is going to work. The first tier is the Angel of Music. This is the highest tier for my absolute favorite adaptations of this story. These are the ideals, the adaptations that manage to capture the haunting beauty of the book. This is also the tier where the book lives. These adaptations are a promise made good from beyond the grave by our beloved departed father. Something beautiful and rare and fleeting and wonderful. These are just the really, really good ones that I love a lot. Next is the Christine Dubois. This is the tier for those adaptations that are just really, really good. They're either extremely book accurate or very compelling story-wise or just super unique or enjoyable. These are our ingenues. They're beautiful and full of promise. Next is the La Carlotta. So in the book, La Carlotta is described as having a technically perfect voice. She's talented, a proven performer, but she lacks passion and soul. She'll hit any note you tell her to hit, but it's not going to stir anything in you. So too, the La Carlotta tier is reserved for those adaptations that are enjoyable to watch. They check most of the boxes, but there's something about the adaptation that does not stir the soul. They are our lead sopranos, but maybe it's time for a new lead soprano, if you get what I'm saying. Next is the Raoul de Chagny tier. These are middle-of-the-road, unoffensive adaptations. Now, it took me years of deliberation, self-reflection, and internal arguments to come to this conclusion that Raoul is a good character and a better fit for Christine. And now I'm happy to say that I feel neutral, sometimes even positive, about Raoul de Chagny. And so these are the adaptations that I feel neutral and sometimes even positive about. Next is the Persian. We are getting into the lower tiers here, but don't take this lower ranking as any sort of commentary on the Persian himself. I think he's a great character, but he is always missing from the adaptations. And the movies that land in this tier are adaptations that miss the point of Phantom of the Opera entirely. Bad, boring, book inaccurate, devoid of any gothic romance. Next, this is technically the lowest ranking tier. You'll see that there's another one, but we'll get into that. So this is technically the worst of the worst. This is the Phantom of the Opera tier. Again, this is not a commentary on my opinion about the character. It's more that before Christine's kindness helps redeem the Phantom, take him from monster to man, he's evil. He's a murderer and a stalker, and he kills people, and he's the villain of the story. So too, these adaptations are horrible criminals trying to blow up the opera house. Many would say they're irredeemable. These adaptations are the aftermath of the unmasking. These adaptations are the ones who grab you and they take your hands and they force you to scratch their face while screaming, "Feast your eyes, glut your soul on my accursed ugliness." Horrible, horrible, bad movies that try to hide their horrible badness under the cool mask of being a Phantom of the Opera adaptation. Finally, I don't know if anything will actually go in this tier, but because Gaston Leroux did such a good job of making you pity and fear the Phantom in equal measure, I don't feel great about labeling the Phantom of the Opera as completely evil. That kind of misses the point of the story. You'd have to put me in the Persian tier if I did that. And if there's one thing we learned from the book's final lair scene, it's that someone as far gone and wounded and wicked as the Phantom can be redeemed. So this is the Erique tier. It's for horrible, horrible, terrible, bad adaptations that have at least one redeeming feature. I wanted to make sure I had that tier just in case, but at this point, I don't know if anything will actually go in there. Anyway, now that that's taken care of, like I said, the book is gonna be living up in the Angel of Music tier. Next, let's go ahead and rank the 1925 films, since I didn't have a chance to do that last time. If you've watched my 1925 review, you'll know that I have slightly complicated feelings about it. The 1925 film is one of the most book-accurate adaptations that exist. And you would think that that would mean, look, you would think that that would mean that it would be up here in the Angel of Music tier. But no, because they fumbled the ending. When they shot a book-accurate ending, the studio had said, no, we don't like that. Let's go ahead and do something else. And after several different tries, they decided to keep him a villain till the end, and instead they had a mob jump him and then throw his body into the Seine. And that, oh boy, that could almost go down to the Persian for how much they missed the point. And I really, I'm tempted to put it in the Persian, but I won't because it is so book accurate when you take into account the fact that Lon Chaney's makeup is the most book accurate version of Eric's face that we've ever gotten. It has the grasshopper, it has the scorpion, it has the torture chamber. It did so well in so many aspects that I can't in good conscience put it in the Persian category. So instead I'm gonna drop it up here in the La Carlotta. It is technically almost perfect. It's hitting all those notes. It's checking almost every box. But because they fumbled the ending so badly, it stirs nothing in my soul, except anger, actually. And so that is going in the La Carlotta. Now for the final tier, the movie we've been talking about, the 1943 adaptation, I'm gonna hand it back over to other Summer. Thank you. Hello, thanks, Summer. For the 1943 Phantom, starting with the uniqueness of the take and how much I like it, I would say this is a pretty unique take, mostly due to the fact that they did make it a rom-com. It feels fresh and funny even to this day, and while it doesn't do a great job of adapting the book, it does do a great job of telling the story of Christine's love triangle. It's got some great jokes, some great visual comedy, extremely well done music, even if the opera scenes take up most of the movie. They are so much fun to watch, and it has a beautiful song. Like, I love the lullaby of the bells and how that weaves through the story and how it is important to the story, even if the reason it's important was ultimately removed. I love that song. I love it. Let me sing a little for you. Hear those bells ringing soft and loud. That's it. Thank you. And it also does a really good job, at the beginning at least, of making me feel for the Phantom. The way his pre-acid, pre-mask, pre-Phantom scenes play out is devastating, and the slow unfurling of his situation, the way he loses his job, being on the verge of losing his apartment, losing his ability to help Christine, which is obviously the only thing he actually cares about, and thinking his music was lost, and then not just lost but stolen from him, the way he finally snaps, the sound he makes when the acid gets thrown. It's all devastating. And so while I do think the nature of this new origin undercuts a lot of what makes book Phantom so tragic, it is still very well done for this movie. And Anatole's closing line in the final lair scene,
His suffering and madness will be forgotten. His music, his concerto, will remain.
It allows the story to end with sort of a vague echo of the hope Christine gives with her forehead kiss in the original. Rather than a monster being turned into a man through an act of kindness, this ending allows the man Claudin was before he became a monster to live on through his work. And I think it is a sweet, sort of hopeful ending, a bittersweet hopeful ending. So I think it handles that well. It's a fun watch, it's a good movie. Overall, despite its many, many book accuracies, I really enjoyed it. And editing Summer, show them where I'm ranking it. Now, I think I'm actually gonna argue this one as Christine Dubois. Looking at the tiers, it's definitely not Angel of Music because it doesn't have the sauce, okay? It does not have what it needs to have it doesn't have the drama or the horror or the pity to capture the spirit of the book. So it's definitely not Angel of Music. I can't say that it's La Carlotta because it does stir the soul. It stirs the soul with joy and whimsy, not pity, but it does stir the soul. This is a fun, enjoyable movie. It actually was nominated for several awards and it won 2 Oscars. I'm pretty sure it won for Best cinematography and best art direction. Rightly so. It is a beautifully made movie. It's got gorgeous sets, the Technicolor's incredible, the costumes are beautiful. So I think I've talked myself into it. I am gonna put the 1943 in the Christine Dubois tier because it is beautiful and full of promise. All right, well, I think that's everything I have to say about that. Thank you so much for watching. I'm having such a fun time making this series, getting to revisit some movies I've enjoyed but haven't rewatched in years, getting to discuss a topic I find super fascinating, and I hope you guys are having fun too, because I'm having a blast. My socials are linked below in case you want to follow me on there. Comment below to let me know if you've seen the 1943 Phantom, what your favorite part of it is, and of course, any Phantom adaptations that you don't want me to miss. Like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next installment of 100 Years of Phantom, where we'll be going over the Hammer horror version of Phantom from the 1960s. That's all I have to say. That's everything that I'm gonna say. That's it. That's all of it. Jesus loves you. Bye! I did it! I did it! I did it.